Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome back to CYP. I hope everyone had a lovely Christmas break, and can I take this opportunity to wish everyone a happy new year. It's never too late. Can I also take this opportunity to welcome Councillor Willis-Croft to our panel. We're very pleased to have you join us and look forward to your contributions tonight and in following meetings. For tonight's agenda, we have quite a unique meeting in the CYP calendar, in that we'll be primarily focusing on the business plan from the October and December cabinet. Tonight is an opportunity as a panel to scrutinize these papers and to pose questions to their chief architects. On that note, we're really glad to be joined in the chamber by the Director of Finance, Roger Kershaw, and by the Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Services, Councillor Christie. Thank you both for joining us tonight. As well as, of course, the cabinet members, councillors Fraser and Kenny, whose insight will also be useful regarding the impact of these proposals. Now, I'm aware that for some of us, this is our first budget meeting. And so can I reiterate to all the newbies, myself included, that our role and responsibility in this process is to scrutinize these proposals through our questions, and if necessary, and with the panel's agreement, we can make referrals to Cabinet through the overview and scrutiny commission later this month. Also, can I add that while I understand that we can get quite passionate when it comes to budgetary matters, please can I remind all members to treat each other with the courtesy and respect that we normally see in these meetings. And with that said, let's proceed with the agenda. To begin with, are there any apologies for absence? I don't think there are. Okay, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? No. Okay, we'll move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Does the panel agree that these minutes are a true and accurate reflection of that meeting? Okay, brilliant. Then let's move straight on to the business plan update. I want to begin by handing over to Councillor Christie to introduce the reports, and then over to Roger for a more detailed overview of the overall budget. And it will be great for us to also hear from Director Jane McSherry on the implication of these proposals on the department. And so over to Councillor Christie.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. I'm happy to be here to discuss the business plan updates from the October and December Cabinet meetings, including the relevant parts of the £3 million in revenue growth that we're putting into this cost of living budget, and also this round of savings proposals. As my first budget process as Cabinet member, I'm extremely grateful to the directors, to Roger and to Jane and to their teams. I've seen all the hard work that's gone into this process, the many rounds of proposals, challenge meetings, research, discussion, everything that's gone on. I'm very grateful for that. And as a result, I'm extremely confident that these budget updates, the growth proposals and the savings proposals are robust, reasonable and sustainable. But clearly I didn't come into politics to make savings to the council's budget, but and I'm sure none of us in this room did. But in the environment we're in, with the severe financial constraints we're facing from the government, it is necessary that we take these steps to ensure we bring forward a balanced and sustainable cost of living budget in March. So, Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions from panel members, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor. Over to you, Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you've got the members' information pack in front of you, which, as Councillor Christie outlined, contains both the October and the December Cabinet reports. And you will forgive me for just concentrating on the December report, which is obviously was a continuation of the work we did in October. And of course, I'm accepting the fact that there is a further budget report going to the January Cabinet on the 16th. But really, just to bring out some headlines from the pack that you see before you, which also contains growth proposals, savings proposals, and equality impact assessments. You'll notice that with regards to the summarised budget position contained within the December report, that we were at that time still forecasting a gap in the medium-term financial settlement for both 23-24 throughout the 4-year medium-term position, and that gap at that time was some 4.3 million for 23-24, but it contains some useful gains and some pressures for the council, which I'll just briefly introduce from that point of view, which moved us from the October position. Of course, we had the benefit of an increase in our council tax base, which generated some additional income from the council tax that we were levying or proposing to levy. We've also had to increase our provision for excess inflation. Now, this is one of the major financial risks that we currently face from a budgetary point of view. In fact, it's really emerging from the cost of living situation that we're all experiencing. And that is no different for the council in terms of the inflationary pressures that we face, both from utilities and for a range of our contracts and our service provision. And so I felt it prudent to put some extra resource into providing for that excess inflation. We've also, just to pick out some other threads from the summary position, we also benefited from the reversal of the national insurance increase for the social care levy, which was originally mooted but then reversed on the budget, and that saved us some £1 million. We've also benefited from the success and prudent financial investments we've made within our pension fund, which is the way that impacts on the council is that can have an impact on the employer's pension contributions, and the fact that our pension fund is in a fairly robust state and actually is in some surplus, we felt it prudent that we could reduce employers' pension contributions by some 0.5%, which has saved us about £500,000, which is a positive aspect. But the budget figures also include revenue growth, as Councillor Christie alluded to, which are basically trying to meet the pressures that we're facing in the budget, and of course some savings to mitigate those pressures. So all in all, we arrived at a budget gap at that time of some 4.3 million, which required further savings to be made. And of course, those will be reported to the to the January Cabinet, which I'm pleased to inform members will produce a balanced budget, if accepted, for 23-24 and throughout the medium-term financial position. So without further ado, I suppose the other thing I would mention that in these proposals here before December, the assumption on council tax was that we would increase, the planning assumption was we increase it by 2%, and of course the settlement came along late in December, which increased the thresholds potentially for councils, and that would be something that will be considered in January Cabinet. So you have your pack before you, and tonight you've got 2 growth bids for this particular scrutiny committee, 2 savings proposals with 2 equality impact assessments. So I'm happy to take any questions, and indeed is Councillor Christie, on any of those matters that you probably want to hear from the director at this stage.
Thank you. So as Roger says, we have 2 growth proposals, and those are in your pack on page 9. So for this department, we've got growth proposals of 1,871,000. So and those are mainly around the two areas in the budget where you would have seen over a period of time there are some considerable pressures. So one is around our children's social care workforce, and that's a combination of the fact that agency pay rates are extremely high at the moment, and when we did the previous restructure, the assumptions about the vacancy rates and related underspends have been overtaken by the increase in agency rates. But also when we've done a benchmarking exercise against neighbouring authorities, we can see that we there's a pay gap between what other authorities are offering and what we are. So this is also going to correct that pay gap by bringing our social workers, what we're offering our social workers into competitively with other local authorities, which will help reduce our agency rate. So the 2 things together will attract the best talent that we can get into Merton. So very happy with that growth proposal. And the second is around the home to school transport. So due to the increase in EHCPs that you are aware of related to specialist placements over the last 5 years, there has been a resultant increase in the need for transport. So the budget has not kept pace with the spend that we're spending on transport. That has been further exacerbated by the inflationary pressures that we're finding in relation to that transport, which is mixed up of a number of things. As you're aware, petrol costs have been really high. There's a shortage of drivers. There's a lack of competition in the taxi market, for example, that we're having to work really hard on. So we've got a number of ways that we're going to try and maximise our in-borough provision, which will reduce the need for transport. We're reviewing our travel direct payments. We're increasing the offer in terms of travel training. So there's a number of things we're doing to try to mitigate that. And you'll see that although there is an increase in 23-24 as a growth bid, some of that we will put back as sort of, will go back into the budget in the second year, because we will have made some efficiency savings there. So those are the 2 growth bids. Then there are 2 savings bids, and the details of those are on page 19. And those savings bids total 523,000. And those are related mainly to the pension and redundancy budget, which the council puts to one side. It's the council's contribution to maintained schools redundancy costs. And that budget over a number of years has underspent by around 600,000 a year. So we're proposing a 200 saving on that, which we think we should safely be able to meet. It makes no bearing on redundancy decisions that sit with schools. It's just that as we have not been spending that budget, we feel confident that we could make that saving. And the other is we've set a 1% efficiency target across all of our controllable budgets within children, lifelong learning and families. And those are, for example, things like reducing costs on printing, on staff travel, because actually now staff do more meetings remotely, virtually. It's the use of reducing the use of external venues for meetings and training, because that's now a mixture of online and face-to-face, and also more blended approaches in the way we're working with young people where that's appropriate, and building on things that really worked during the pandemic. So that's what the assistant directors have been looking for across their budgets. And the EIAs relating to those 2 savings are on pages 32 to 36 for the pension and redundancy budget, and 37 to 41 for the 1% efficiency savings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those introductions. We'll now lead into questions. And for the questions section, I've decided to group them into sections, which will make it easier for us to work through the papers and make sure that we're all literally on the same page. And I can then also ensure that we cover all the key areas that I'm sure members want to cover. So we'll start off with any questions regarding the summary report, the budget overview report, the smaller pack, and then we'll move on to any questions regarding the growth proposals and the savings proposals and any other comments. So let's start off with questions on the summary report. And I'm first going to check whether there's any members online who have any questions before I then go to members in the room. And we'll take it one question at a time as opposed to how I normally do, because I think that might be easier to answer the questions than hitting you with 3 questions at once. So any members online have any questions? No. Okay, we'll go to members in the room. And again, this is regarding the budget overview report. Councillor Hayes.
Yeah, hang of it. Thank you, Chair. It's a follow-up question of sorts, but it does relate to the budget. I think it was in November or December, I can't remember now. I asked a question about defibrillators. And I was promised at that meeting that you'd come back in terms of the government has now mandated, just for background, the government has now mandated that all schools should have defibrillators. I asked the question, was that catered for in the budget or did the government do an allocation? Now I'm conscious that, well, for example, I'm a governor on Gorringe School in Sandy Lane. They have a defibrillator. And some schools have defibrillators, but I think the cost is about £1,000 per machine. So I just wondered, is that accounted for in the budget, or has the government set aside any monies for that mandate that they enacted about September, October last year? And I think it was in response to the Jamie Carragher, Sky Sports presenter, campaign, because of some terrible things that have happened in schools with some children actually, and obviously some adults. So is it inside the budget? Have the government allocated, and what's the plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll direct that question to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. So the government scheme for mandating that all schools should have defibrillators will be entirely met by the DfE. They're starting with rolling out that programme to schools this month. I'm not quite sure where Merton sits in the sort of rollout timetable, but it's not needed to be within our budget.
So that, just very quickly, I was tempted to say in my bit that I don't expect them to fund it, but they've surprised me, so great. Thank you.
Any other questions on the summary report? Okay, we'll move on to the growth proposals. And again, I will start with any members online if they've got any questions regarding the growth proposals. Okay, I will move on to questions in the chamber. All right, Councillor Butcher.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask, with regards to the salary uplift for children's social care, could we get a bit more detail on what net benefit we're expecting to see? Thank you very much.
So I think 2 things. So we we expect to see more permanent staff, so less reliance on agency staff, and that has two effects, doesn't it? So because we're overspending on our agency budget, the more we can get permanent staff and attract permanent staff into Merton and the right staff, and the more we can keep them, then we reduce that agency spend. So it's over time, it will hopefully balance the budget within that, because we'll have more permanent staff and fewer agency staff.
And Councillor Kirby.
Well, first to say how lovely it is to see some growth in the budget. It's got to be rare. so really well done for that. And also in that second one, home to school transport, where you make reference to increasing the out of borough capacity for send, I think that's really good news too. Just querying really, how many children do we have that are out of borough? Is that something you can answer?
I can't do it off the top of my head, sorry, but I can certainly send you that information. Yes, yeah.
It's just really because trying to get kids into borough that are out of borough is going to save us an enormous amount of money, isn't it? So
yeah, absolutely. And so quite a lot of the children who are out of borough will be in neighbouring boroughs. There'll be some that are slightly further away, but that's absolutely right. Increasing the capacity in borough is better. It's better on every level. So it's better for children to be nearer to their communities, to be able to be, an active part of their communities. It enables them to be more independent in getting to school, as well as being a more cost-effective way to deliver the services.
Any other questions around the growth proposals? Okay, might be a short meeting. Is that wishful thinking? Okay, let's move on to the growth proposals. And again, sorry, savings proposals, apologies. And again, I'll start off by checking whether there's any members online that have any questions here. Okay, let's go to members in the chamber. Any questions around the savings proposals? Councillor MacArthur, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It's just about the 1% efficiency target. I wonder if you have any concerns about any implications that might have. I know we discussed sort of the teachers, maybe not posts not being filled, but also other things like this is training, not reducing non-mandatory training. Is there any concerns that you have that the implications of this efficiency might have?
No, I don't think so. So we in setting it, we looked across the budgets to see where we could, that we could make those savings and ensure that wasn't going to have an impact on service users. Most of the savings we're going to make around training will be around the opportunities we have now, instead of paying for external venues to do that training online, to do it in different ways. So no, I don't think there's anything that we are concerned about in meeting that target.
And can now go to Councillor Willis-Croft.
Yeah, on savings, we have outstanding and award-winning children's services. So how will officers guarantee that our outstanding children's services will continue?
So neither of these savings would impact on the service that we deliver. So we spent a great deal of time thinking about what we could do that would create a saving but wouldn't have that impact. So as I say, the efficiency savings are much more around things like reducing printing, travelling, external venues, and the pension and redundancy budget is actually a budget that is consistently underspent. So we expect that to be accessible and easy to achieve.
Any other questions around the savings proposals? Okay. Are there any other questions outside of the categories we've just covered regarding the business plan that members would like to ask? Okay, so for me, I just have one question. If we could go back to the budget overview, and that's regarding the autumn statement, that the government published, where they said that they were committing 2.3 billion pounds of additional spending on education, I think over a 2-year period. Do we have any idea how some of that money might filter into Merton, and how that might impact our education services, or are we not to the stage where we can determine that yet?
Thank you, Chair. I'll say details are still filtering through, and day by day, new bits of information come through. But as we understand it as of today, for Merton schools, Merton maintained schools, we don't see the money that goes to the academies. There would be a increase of 4.4 million funding for them from that. The headline figure, if you looked it up on gov.uk, would say 6.1, but there's a bit of smoke and mirrors in there because some of that money is existing funding that's been rebadged as schools block funding that used to be a specific grant. So the actual net increase to Merton schools will be 4.4 million, which is about, sorry, ignore that, 5.6 million. Do apologize, looking at the wrong column. It'll be 5.6. That's about a 4% increase for schools.
Thank you for that response, Richard. Okay, so if there are no further questions, Councillor Butcher, one last question, go on.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take it very briefly back to savings and ask a question. Obviously, we're reducing the budget for the central CSF budget by 200,000. Can I just ask, in the last year or the last couple of years, what the actual spend of that budget has been compared to what we've allocated for it?
So we went through that quite carefully, and it's been underspending that budget. The budget is about 1.62 million, and it's been underspending by around 600,000 consistently over a number of years.
Okay, thank you. So if there are now no further questions, all that's left is to thank Councillor Christie and Roger for your attendance this evening, and for taking our questions, along with CSF department for your contributions as well on key questions. At this point, we're going to be continuing the rest of our agenda, but if yourselves would not like to join us for the rest of our agenda, you are welcome to get on with your evenings, and we'll continue with our agenda. Sorry, there appears to be a question from Councillor Hall.
Yes, I was just wondering, as we have the council budget meeting on the 1st of March, we have another children and young people's meeting in February, on the 8th of February.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be possible to raise budget considerations at that time?
That is a good question, and it's there is an agenda for that meeting, which is a preset agenda, and there isn't a budgetary item on that agenda, but before that meeting, there will be an overview and scrutiny commission meeting where I'll be representing the panel on that meeting. So if there are any budget issues that you want me to raise in that meeting, I'm happy to meet with you separately to get your comments, which I can then take to that meeting. How does that work?
Okay, yes, the reason why I was asking is I was on holiday until the weekend, and so only got to look at these papers basically on Sunday, Monday, and really haven't had enough time to properly scrutinise them all. And so, I'm worried that something might slip by. So I'd like another opportunity to raise some concerns then.
Well, you have a chance to feed any CYP relevant concerns, which I can then take to overview on scrutiny. Yeah, no problem. Councillor Hayes.
I'm sorry, Chair, but I'm a little bit unclear what's just happened there. Because are we saying we get a second go in I thought we're clearing something now on me. Have I misunderstood that?
No, I can help clarify.
Okay.
So this is our opportunity as a panel, as a CYP panel, to feed into the business plan proposals that came out of the December cabinet. So this is the opportunity to feed into those plans. And following this meeting and the outcomes of this meeting, it's been my role to represent CYP at the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, which will happen towards the end of January, and it'll be before the cabinet meets to approve the final budget, I believe, but do correct me if I'm wrong. And so that's the process. So this is the chance for scrutiny to feed into the budget, but there'll also be the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, where members can come to me as their representative on that commission to communicate any feedback from you. I hope that's clarified things. Any more points before we let Councillor Christie and Roger go? All right. Thank you very much and have a lovely evening. And before we move on, actually, you can go. But before we move on, just to clarify, actions that came out of this discussion, just that Councillor Kirby asked for information regarding the number of children with special educational needs that access out of borough transport services. So that's something that we'll send following today's meeting. Okay, now let's move on to agenda item 5. And for this, we'll hand over to Keith for an exciting update. I'm sure we've all been waiting for, which is concerning the involvement of children and young people in scrutiny. And so over to you, Keith, for the update.
This is now pressing the wrong button. Thank you very much. So the paper in front of you describes the answer, I think, to 3 questions, which hopefully we can have a think through tonight. So first 2 questions really come from yourselves to young people. One is, how can young people be involved in scrutiny activity? The second one is, how do we engage young people in the democratic functions of scrutiny? And the third one, in a sense, is coming to you from young people, which was the last time I was here, we presented the young people's survey, where we had 2,000 young people gave their views on what the issues were for them in Merton post-pandemic. One of the issues was they didn't feel listened to. So how do we respond to that? And here is one set of potential answers to that. So what the paper includes is a proposal for young inspectors to be made part of, sorry, it's not working wrong, made part of the scrutiny panel, in a sense that they would be officers attending scrutiny. Their function here would be to enable the scrutiny function to listen to young people's views. Young inspectors, if you've not come across them before, are council employees. They work in the participation team in the council. They're young people who are locally recruited. There are employees on small contracts, and their job is to attend adult meetings. So they enable us and through our functions to listen to the views of young people. We've had many young inspectors through the time in Merton, and we're just busy recruiting some new ones. Their job would be to work within the council, and what we're proposing here is that we might add to their tasks, coming to scrutiny meetings. They would be supported in that task by the participation team that would prepare them for the meetings by reading through the papers with them, and they would also think through what items they think would be best suited to their input. So which ones have got might give a view from young people, which ones we think actually might benefit from another task later, where we don't know the views of young people, we might want to collect the views of young people. So that's the idea of how we might answer the question. So the paper is suggesting that all scrutiny panels have young people attending them. The young people would be allocated based on their link to the children's plan. So each young person who is a young inspector currently has a link to a particular outcome within the children's plan. Let's say the outcome is health, then they would attend the health plan. So it's that kind of idea. So we would have young people, one young person attending each scrutiny panel.
Thank you very much for that update, Keith, and also thank you for all the work you've put into putting together that proposal, so we had something practical to present back to members with all of your concerns factored in. So like I said, it is fantastic news, and I'm looking forward to implementing it on our panel starting next month and seeing it implemented on the other panels as well. I think it's a huge step forward for the democratic practices of scrutiny. So thank you very much, Keith. And similar to our previous colleagues, if at this point you would like to, unless there are any questions, I mean, this was more of an update, but if there are any questions, Keith is available for questions. No? Brilliant. All right, then. Thank you very much, Keith. So now we'll move on to the departmental updates. But before I hand over to Jane to introduce this segment, I would just like to quickly comment on the recent SEND inspection revisit. Just to say that on behalf of the panel, I would like to praise all staff across the department for the positive outcome in that inspection. I think it's a real testament to the work you've put in since the last inspection, and which we were able to scrutinize recently through the written statement of action. There were quite a lot of positive comments in that report, highlighting, things like the collaborative work you've done, and the inclusion of parents and carers in SEND policy. And so just a massive well done on that inspection. I think that's well deserved. And with that, I will now hand over to Jane for her introduction.
Thank you, Chair. That stole half of my introduction. So obviously one of the things the report outlines is SEND inspection outcomes. So if you remember, there were 3 areas identified where there were weaknesses in the original inspection, and all of those the local area had made sufficient progress, and it very much is a local area inspection. So I'd really like to echo your thanks, but special thanks to our staff. But also our partners, in particular our health partners, who were really key in the work we needed to do to make progress in those 3 areas, and who were very actively involved in both progress and the inspection, and also our parents and carers and children for working with us to improve our services and the outcomes for children, and our Parent Carer Forum Kids First, who are really active collaborative partner with us in improving those services. The other thing I thought was worth highlighting is this report. So at the beginning of the year, we agreed some key areas that members of the panel were keen to have updates on. So this report covers some of those areas: alternative education provision, speech and language therapy services, support for gifted and talented pupils, and an update on the Black Lives Matters work with schools. I'm probably just open for questions there, Jim.
Thank you. So we will now open up for questions. And now we'll go back to our usual way of taking questions, and I'll do 3 questions at a time, starting off with any members online. No. Okay, I'll take any questions from members in the chamber. Yes, Councillor Hall.
Yes, I wanted to add our congratulations for the inspection and the excellent result. And just to say, we recognise it's down to the collective hard work of staff across children's services. One point though is about health needs, which obviously crosses over the boundaries of this committee and others, which is, it's about sharing information about things like collecting vaccination data from schools and tracking progress. I'm just wondering if we can make some progress with that.
Do we have two more questions? Yes.
Hi, I just have a question about the alternative education providers. How do we evaluate how that is working? Do we look at best practice in other boroughs? How do we evaluate the outcomes for students who have gone through that to ensure we're getting the best outcomes for them?
And if I can ask the third question, if there isn't a third questionnaire from the chamber. My question is around the gifted and talented pupils. And as I was reading this update, I was just wondering whether there's a metric for measuring the impact of the mastery approach, because it does talk about the way it works, but there's, from what I can see, there wasn't a metric for measuring the impact of it, or is that just measured through the grades the students get? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the immunisation data, so we usually have an update once a year from health colleagues. So the immunisation programme is not run locally, it's a national programme that certainly colleagues within public health help our schools and services to engage with that programme. They come and make sure that schools are aware when those immunisation programmes are going to be available, but it's a nationally delivered programme, and we usually have a report, I'm looking to Stella here, but once a year, don't we, that gives us an update on how Merton is doing compared with other boroughs in terms of vaccinations. So that's usually annually on the scrutiny programme, and where you would get the opportunity to ask those questions of people delivering that national programme. So in terms of the alternative education question, so I suppose there'd be there's two things. So we have our own registered pupil referral units. That's one of our maintained schools. So that school that is Ofsted inspected. The results from that that provision is updated in our standards report as part of the overall outcomes for children within Merton. And then there are a number of children who may attend other alternative education providers. So we work across Southwest London to quality assure alternative education providers, and the reason we do it across Southwest London is because there are providers in Merton, for example, who have children from Merton or Wandsworth and Sutton, and then we may have children who access alternative providers in another borough, and the setup is that the borough where the provision is based leads on that quality assurance process, and then other boroughs join in. So that happens on a regular basis, but actually our alternative providers are, the majority, if not all of them, are actually registered as schools. So they are also Ofsted inspected, and their results are scrutinised in that way. I don't know if, Keith, I'm looking at you, whether you wanted to add anything to that in terms of the quality assurance process.
Yeah, so the question was about whether we look at good practice elsewhere, and certainly we do. So we're part of pan-London groups looking at the quality of alternative education. In fact, the South London Partnership has been giving training and advice to other boroughs about how to do the quality assurance. So I would say that we are an example of good practice, and our inspection, our quality assurance process aligns with the inspection results of the schools when they get inspected. So that's a good sign as well, I think. There are a couple of providers which are new to the borough, which one new one which has just been quality assured, which is not a school. But if the provider is not a school, then the children can't attend full time, and it'll be a supplementary support in a sense to other provisions. So it's the kind of thing you get when it's very vocational. So for example, if you might have someone that does electrical installation or plumbing, then that would be an additional provider that might do some work alongside a school provision. The other thing I'd say about the PRU itself is it's obviously part of our quality assurance process through our school improvement service. So it gets a challenge and support like all schools do from school improvement and its governing body.
And I will respond to the question about metric for measuring the impact of the mastery approach. I think a short answer would be to say that when we look at the published results at the end of Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, and also GCSE and A levels, we will be seeing some of the impact there because particularly in the primary phase, children and young people who are attaining at those higher levels, it talks about greater depth. So in other words, they have understood the concepts within the curriculum at greater depth, and so there is mastery there. But I think it is a more complicated question than that, because as we attempted to say, what we want is every child to master the aspects of the curriculum, so that whether they are achieving at higher levels, if we should call that, or whether they are achieving at lower levels, they will have mastered and they will have really good solid understanding. And that is not so easy to measure in metrics. And so what you will find is that teachers are measuring that in their assessment processes in the classroom.
Thank you for those answers. We will now take the next round of questions, starting off with Councillor Charles. Do we have two other members that would like to ask questions at this point? Okay, Councillor Charles, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to ask a question about the mastery issue. You're saying about mathematics. So what I wanted to know is, how are you going about, because obviously the Prime Minister has also mentioned that, so how do you go about getting suitable teachers and mathematics teachers and training them and developing them? Thank you.
If there are no other questions from members, I've got a couple of questions here that I would like to pose. Moving on to the disproportionality section of the report and the Black Lives Matter and Equalities Forum, I would like some clarity on point 2.33, just as to what that point it's saying exactly. Were the Black curriculum workshops a success or not? And would it be possible to get an update on what the current state is on schools that are implementing a Black curriculum within the borough? And also, if you could address point 2.35 on the strategy to address racism and racial inequality in Merton schools, the strategy for this academic year. I haven't seen that strategy yet, so I'm just curious as to where I can find that strategy, because I haven't come across it yet.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Chair. I think all those three questions sit with me, so I'll attempt to answer those in turn. So maths, the question around securing suitable teachers and then the training and support and development of those teachers. The recruitment of teachers within the borough, there are some subjects which are harder to recruit to, and maths would be amongst that, but our schools are not talking about particular issues such as, it is causing causing them concerns at the moment. We are lucky enough in Southwest London to have a maths hub, which is actually run out of the Wandle Teaching School Hub in Wandsworth. And actually one of our advisors works with the hub. And there is a very strong program of professional development that comes through the hub, which really focuses on the mastery approach. And indeed our advisor, as well as working with the hub, does more bespoke work for schools across the borough. So we've got a really strong program of support, and the hub works across all phases. In terms of the success or otherwise of the workshops from the Black curriculum, as the report suggests, it was a mixed response. Some schools felt that they were already more advanced than the input was given. Others found it very useful, and all those who were involved have further developed their curriculum in light of the advice given. The strategy is actually a school strategy, so it wouldn't have come to this scrutiny panel. It is a strategy that was devised amongst schools, and it is a strategy that they use amongst themselves. It is something that potentially we could ask the schools if we could perhaps share more widely, but it is not a public-facing document, so we would need to consider that carefully.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for those answers, and for clarifying the situation with the Black curriculum. Because I did reread it a few times and I don't think it was that clear, but your explanation was very clear. So thank you very much for that. Any further questions around the departmental updates? Councillor MacArthur.
Thank you. It's just a quick one. The Youth Justice, I noticed that they've got the turnaround grant. I just wondered if there was any more information on how that's going to be used. Sure. Thank you. And so before you take that question as well, if I can also add a couple of other questions, if there aren't any questions from the floor, because these were all points that were in the work program, and so as I was reading it, quite a few questions came to mind. So firstly, just following on from Councillor MacArthur's question on that turnaround grant, yeah, it'd be good to get an idea of how much that turnaround grant will be over those 3 years, and how we can ensure we're identifying the right children that would benefit from a grant like that. And in the section around supporting vulnerable children, on point 239, as I was looking at the numbers of EHCPs that have ceased and that are for children that are no longer on those plans, and also the numbers of children who have moved out of the borough. I think the figure was 125. I was just wondering what some of the common reasons were for those figures. So some more information on that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors, and thank you, Chair. So the first question, which is around the turnaround grant. So the first question was, how was it going to be used? So the turnaround grant for the first phase of the grant is a very small amount of money that goes on till the end of the financial year. The purpose of that is to start effectively our project management, which involves us recruiting a project manager, and identifying 2 lots of pieces of work that we want to undertake with a group of young people. And that's through 2 commission pieces of work. So one's sort of activity-based and one's sports-based in the borough. So there's some commissioning work that's gone on. We've gone out to tender. We are close to allocating both the lots to a particular party. And we are this week recruiting to the project management post as well. So that's how that's going to be used in the first phase. In terms of the breakdown of costs, the first phase grant is roughly around £10,000. I'll have to come back to you, Chair, with a bit more detail. I was trying to find the information as you were talking, but I'll come back to you with a bit more detail. I don't want to give you incorrect figures, but it's not a huge grant, and it's one that's given across to most youth justice departments, and we're making best use of it as we can, but we'll come back with some further figures for you.
In terms of the numbers of EHCPs that were ceased, and also the numbers of children and young people with EHCPs who moved out of borough. So an EHCP will be ceased through a very measured process through annual reviews, which involve seeking the advice of professionals. And it will be that the cessation will happen where the EHCP is no longer needed. The vast majority of cases, that will be for older children and young people, where education is not part of their current plan, and the focus of the EHCPs is on that education. The 125 who moved out of borough, I wouldn't be able to give you particular reasons, but the hypothesis would be that they are moving for the same reasons as all families and children might be moving, which will be for a range of reasons. Maybe they are moving home, most likely because they're moving home, and then of course they're attending a school which is closer to their home, and the EHCP would then be maintained by their home borough.
So there aren't like any common trends.
I will ask Keith in terms of thinking from the education welfare perspective, but we haven't looked at that particular cohort. But it would, as I said, the hypothesis, we are not concerned about those numbers. The hypothesis is that they will have moved for the range of reasons that families will have moved to another home.
We have a significant turnover of population in Merton, so we have a significant number of families that will move out of the borough and change schools. So that population is part of a wider group that are moving around. Some of that will be for employment. We have a number of people that come to live in Merton because they're working in London, and then they'll get a job somewhere else and move on somewhere else, so their children will follow them. That's certainly a factor. There's certainly a factor which is related to immigration and emigration. We've seen a large number of people coming into the borough from the Asian subcontinent recently, and we've also seen a large number of people leave into Europe and in the Asian subcontinent as well. So I think as you say, I think it's a part of a wider mobility issue that Merton has very high mobility of its children's population anyway.
Okay, well, thank you for shedding light on that. That's really useful to know. We'll have another round of questions. Please do.
One other reason is the number of private landlords throwing people out because they want to make more money.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, if there are no further questions, then just to recap a couple of actions or points for further clarification. With the immunization data, we understand that it's presented once a year. So is the next time we can expect it around the same time we had it last year, which was around June? Is that correct? Okay. Oh, brilliant. Okay. So that will be for June scrutiny. And Duraj, with figures regarding the turnaround fund, we'll get that following the meeting. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for those answers. We will move on to the performance monitoring report. And with that, I'll hand over to Maisie for her introduction before we then jump into any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is a regular performance report that's received by members. It provides a summary of performance information for the department across 22-23 across this financial year. And this current update uses the data up to November 2022. So you have the exceptions report, which provides summary, some commentary against all of the indicators that are RAG rated red and amber, and it also provides a summary of the data sort of amendments and corrections as well. And that's accompanied by the performance index, which is a series of indicators which are, as I say, RAG rated against a series of targets. And where we have them, it includes also benchmarking against England and or London averages. So the only thing I'd probably draw members' attention to is that we have a couple of RAG changes this quarter. A couple of these are due to some data corrections, which are set out in the paper, in the exceptions paper. But these are particularly around indicators 16, 17, and 18. There have been some corrections. These were around foster placement stability, or placement stability, and foster care placements with in-house foster carers. All three of these indicators are green, and they're showing, sort of good improvement. Indicator 16, although the amendment does mean that it shows a slight decline in performance, it's still a strongly performing indicator, and it's RAG rated green. And I'm happy to take any other questions as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor or from any members online? Okay. There's no questions. So before we move on to the work program, and given we've got both cabinet members in the room, and we're doing well for time. Not that I want to hold people up unnecessarily. I certainly will not do that. I would like to offer the cabinet members 5 minutes to provide any updates to the panel on your activities recently. So shall we start off with Councillor Fraser for your 5-minute update?
Well, thank you, Chair. Well, as you know, that I was appointed in May, and time is flying by. It's been really interesting, very, very busy. I agree with all of what went on before. I have a fantastic group of officers working with, and so I'm learning very fast. And some of it I relate to me anyway, because I'm a lecturer and have a different background, plus a background in the courts and background with the police. So it all intermingle and come in quite handy. I got ready for this afternoon or this evening questions, but in fact we weren't asked any, or didn't get a chance because the officers did so well. And I'm really, really pleased, because what it does is keep Merton at the higher end and our young people, because they are being looked after very well. I must say I'm champion for young people's voice. And so I'm beginning to start working with them to see what happens. They're a fantastic set. And well, not many people here who helped me, but the Christmas cards for Christmas, I know I started a little bit late, and so to try and do almost 400 was ridiculous. I was up at about 4 o'clock 3 mornings wondering, I need to get these done. And we got them done. And thanks to everybody who helped, because I'm sure it meant a lot to those young people. And as I work through my portfolio and go out, I realize there's huge partnership. And I'm meeting most of those people. Social workers, I met 6 of them last week online. We were meant to meet in person, but we can't always meet in person. But in fact, COVID hasn't done us harm, you know, it has helped in some ways because we can meet there. A fantastic amount of meetings to go to, but I'm managing somehow to get through, and I'm learning really, really fast. But all is to the people who I work with. When I listened to all the reports that were being given, I had written down bits, but I didn't get a chance to add anything to it because it wasn't necessary. And you don't need to add when there isn't any point in adding to those things. And so I'm learning, I'm happy, and I hope I won't be changing position anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Member. And as you were speaking, I was reminded of the update in the departmental update around celebrations that were done over the festive period for looked after children. And it just served as a reminder of how these small gestures matter as much as the other activities that we're doing to support our looked after children, and have the chance to take part in the Christmas card writing campaign, which I thought was a really nice small gesture for children who might not otherwise have Christmas cards. So thank you very much for your update, Councillor, and for the work you do. Over to you, Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to second what Councillor Fraser has said, and I think what a great children's schools and families team we've got that are very well led and very responsive to every inquiry and very supportive of every inquiry, and any question is resolved, it's been examined and looked into. So I think Merton is most fortunate to have such a good team, and hence has resulted in that leadership permeated throughout the department to get the outstanding Ofsted, for which I think is fabulous. Within perhaps the new things I've done, I went to see some holiday and activity funds and food funds going on in the summer, which was fabulous to see. It was great to see so many children involved, certain children with a specific need, free school dinners and that sort of thing. Invited to go to them. That's grown all the time. I've got a map and I've lost track of the numbers, but I think it's getting into the 30s now, and it's a wonderful opportunity. And the children go, they have lots of activities, and they're fed with a hot meal every day. And in these school holidays, or just towards the end of them, I went to look at one in particular, and they carry on through the winter. And they took 200 children to the pantomime at Wimbledon. I think Keith was at you and Bob Allen, who were instrumental in getting reduced costing seat at Wimbledon Theatre, which is fantastic. And then searching for funding. I know I only got one person to fund it. I couldn't get everybody, but you got enough funding for children who'd never been to the theatre before, actually went to a pantomime. These are all really positive things for children, offering them new experiences. Keith took me a tour of the young people's facilities in the borough, where I walked miles and miles, again seeing what's offered in the evenings for our young people, keeping them occupied and off the street, somewhere to go, and they're involved. Interesting. I think they were all run by women, how they got them into cooking, coming in and cooking for them and getting them cooking, teaching them life skills that are very valuable. So it's seeing another side of schools. And we have got 95% of our schools good or outstanding. We're aiming for 100%. Always got to aim high. But I think there's so much good practice that goes on in Merton schools, which is a delight to see and celebrate. But we're never forgetting the little bits that can be improved. I think the whole team works to improve that. So I'm delighted to be involved with all the work that's going on. And I don't think I've left anything out, but it covers the whole spectrum from And I just found out an ex-pupil recently qualified as a doctor. So we're Merton educated, state school. So it's covering the whole spectrum of achievement and the care and concern for children and all their needs, as education as well as the welfare.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Member, for those for that overview of your recent activities and the examples of best practice that you raised, and examples of students who are doing well. That's always good to hear. Any questions for the Cabinet members or on their updates? Brilliant. Okay, then we'll move on to the last agenda item, which is very, very short. It's just an update on the work program, which of course we covered a lot of it in the departmental updates. And so this is just to say that as we're approaching the end of this scrutiny calendar year, I think it'll be useful to get updates from the task group chairs and leaders that we currently have underway. And so Stella and myself will be reaching out to the task group chairs and leads to discuss bringing those updates to the next scrutiny. So the panel is up to date on how those task groups are going and what the latest is with those task groups. And with that, I would like to thank everyone this evening for their contributions, for responding to our questions and points on what was the first budget meeting for quite a few of us, and so it's quite new to us, but it was quite painless and actually much shorter than I'd anticipated. But that's a positive, I guess, because we can all have a bit of our evening. So thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you get home safe.